Happy day students, welcome back. So in today's class we'll be studying about introduction to costume design as part of our production design course. I earlier studied in production design, the introduction to production design, how there is a lot of scope for production designers in movies which involve history or sometimes fantasy, right? So just like that, even costume designers have a huge scope in fantasy movies and period dramas, right? So one perfect example which I wanted to show is Wakanda Forever. So this movie won Oscars in 2023 for best costume design, right? Though costume designer was Ms. Ruth Carter. So for this movie, she has created almost 2,000 unique designs for the movie. That's what is called as labor of love. So that's the kind of scope which these kind of movies give to a costume designer. On the one hand, you have Afrofuturism kind of costumes. On the other hand, you have Mesoamerican costumes. And that kind of costume was very challenging for the costume designers because they needed to create costumes which didn't bleed in water. Which were like flexible in water, they shouldn't be sticking to body, right? So that was like real hard work, and that's what I call as labor of love, right? So what is a costume? Costume is anything which includes your clothing, underclothing, hairdressing, makeup, accessories, even your hats, scarves, fans, canes, anything which the characters wears or even carries during the production, that's what is called as your costume. So to be effective, the costume designs for a production should have all these things. First is reflect the production design team's agreed upon interpretation of the production concept. For example, you want the movie to be very gloomy, or you want the movie to be very cheerful, you want the movie to reflect some kind of theme, or say something like anger or something like love. All those things needs to be discussed with the production designer and costume designer, and that should be reflected in the costumes too. Right? Exhibit a unity of style among all costume designs for a production. So when you're making a movie, ensure that the costume design should gel. So your costume should provide a visual reflection of the personality and nature of each character. So we don't dress up introverts the same way we dress up extroverts, right? Introverts dress up differently and extroverts dress up differently, right? For example, in Indian cinema, think of someone like, say, Genelia, right? When she enters the screen, her cheerfulness screams. One reason is, of course, her clothing too, right? The way she dresses up, the way she acts, it's her clothes kind of add on to her personality, to her on-screen personality for that matter, right? So you have to be very conscious about the character's personality, and that should be reflected through the costumes too. Provide visual information about the world of the movie, like the location, where exactly is the movie taking place, the period, the season, that is summer, winter and all those things, time of day, morning, afternoon, noon, like evening, culture, which culture, Mughal culture, British or Indian, socio-economic, whether they are from the upper middle class, lower middle class, religious sentiments, and political environment. All these things can be reflected through your costume design too. So you don't have to convey all these things through dialogues, but they can be conveyed through your costume design. Why costume design is important in film? First is character development. So when we say character development, when there is a shift in the character's mood, when there is a shift in the character's attitude, that reflects in the character's costumes too. So example over here is I'm given as a Varisu. Initially in Varisu movie, Vijay is like a very young, happy person, and he is like travels all around the world, and he's just trying to start a startup. Right? So that's his kind of dressing, and that's reflected in his costumes too, right? Second is when he is there as a MD of his company, so he exhibits a kind of power, right? So his costumes reflect that kind of power too, power dressing. So you see a stark difference between both these costumes, right? So you can see this kind of character development through the movie. So some kind of change in personality, attitude, background, all these things can be seen through your costumes. Sometimes a character's wardrobe can reveal their socio-economic status, their profession, their cultural identity, as well as their emotional state. So this example from Gully Ball, you see that, okay, this person is a Muslim, this person is a little upset or sad for now, and she is trying to console, right? So all these things can be, and yeah, when you look at Alia's character, you also think like, okay, she is a little bit of a cheerful person. The way she wraps her scarf, the color of her scarf, everything screams of that. There's again a perfect example from Vikram Vedha. So when the movie starts, the perception of audience is Madhavan is a very honest police officer, whereas a Vijay Sethupathi is a criminal, right? So Madhavan is dressed in pure white, and Vijay Sethupathi is dressed in pure black. Middle of the movie, there's little bit of gray area in the sense like you're not so sure about Vijay Sethupath's offense. Maybe you think like maybe what he did was right, so that is that kind of gray area coming up, confusion coming up. Towards the end of the movie, both of them are dressed in black, right? So that's how you see the effect of costume design in this movie. So this kind of character change, the attitude change can be reflected in movies too. Time and place, Ponniyin Selvan, you see the characters, Trisha's dressing, saris, and you decide like, okay, fine, this is from Chola period, this is from Chola history, the kind of jewels she wears, the kind of silk she wears, everything says that, okay, this belongs to a specific period, right? This is the famous blue sari from Ye Jawani Hai Diwani. So when Devika Padukone walks with this sari, it creates so much of impact, right? You really can't avoid watching her. So she's there on the screen and she's like so mesmerizingly beautiful in that sari that she is the center of attraction. So these kind of costumes can have a huge visual impact too. And sometimes costumes can be used as a branding tool, like the costumes of Matrix, or say the costumes of Marvel. They are a huge brand by themselves. The costume design process, again, it's a very challenging process. So first thing when you are thinking of costume designers, you should also think of that particular actor. How is this actor going to walk? How is this character dress going to fit to that particular actor? You can't just think like, okay, fine, this costume means this fabric is really good, so let me stitch a costume with that. No, it should go well with the story, it should go well with that actor too. The gate, how is this character going to walk with this particular costume? They should feel comfortable with this costume. They should feel like that particular character when they are wearing that costume. Like you can't dress up a, king like a beggar and ask them to act like a king. No, it doesn't work that way. If you want the actor to act like a king, you have to dress him up like a king, right? So that's where your costume is very, very important. So you have to understand the actor's body too when you are thinking of design. So first, again, you have to read and analyze the script. You have to understand the characters, their motivations, and the overall story. Like how is this character going to act? How is this character going to work out? So first you have to read and analyze the script. You have to understand the different characters in their movies. You have to understand their motivations. You have to understand the overall story, grasp all the important elements, and then design costume for your characters. So develop a vision for the costumes that will enhance the story and the characters. So when you're working with a production, you have to think like how is the costume element going to improvise on the storytelling process? Okay, how can I add more value to the movie through costume design? So that should be your first view when you're working with costume design. Research and concept development. Develop a concept for the costumes. So when you're working with costumes, understand that each and every movie has a specific specific concept. So that needs to be developed during your research process itself. So for that you need to be studying your little bit of history. You should be bringing in a little bit of cultural references too. So as much as possible, it pays to be authentic to history, right? So don't confuse a lot of things, don't mix up a lot of things, don't bring in wrong references. Be very thorough with your research so that you get the perfect references and you can design based on those references. And maybe if you're making a contemporary drama, you can think of what's the current fashion, what's the contemporary trend, and then based on that you can work on it. Collaboration with the production team. So you get along with the production team and then you prepare a proper visual style for your movie. And costume designer collaborates with the makeup artist, hairstylist to ensure that your hairstyle and your makeup also goes together with your costume. Costume sketches and fabric selection. So by this time, costume designer prepares a proper costume sketch and gives it for approval to the director. And after that, they choose the fabrics too, saying like this kind of fabric will work out, this kind of fabric will not work out for this particular character. So sometimes if it's like something like a Marvel movies, they also create prototypes for the costume design too. Fittings and alterations. So when you think that fittings and alterations, so sometimes you need to accommodate the requirements of the actors too. So how they feel comfortable with your kind of costumes. If they're going to say like, okay, I don't feel that comfortable, like I'm not able to move my hand with this costume, in that case you need to accommodate their requirements too. after the designs are finalized and the costumes are approved, the costume designer works with a team of costume makers to produce those costumes. So you have to work with a lot of people, lot of costume makers to ensure that your design is carried out properly. So once the costume is approved, the costume designer ensures that all his designs are carried out properly by the costume makers, and then it's also maintained throughout the production. So that is also the responsibility of the costume designer. Okay. Thank you so much. Hope you had a nice session.